There's a technique that costs $0 and gets rid of all snails in your garden for good. Farmers who discovered it never needed molluscicides or toxic bait again. It works against snails, slugs, and pill bugs in any type of garden. Researchers at Embrapa Hortalizas tested it for over 20 years in real-world conditions. The results were consistent, free, and devastating for the molluscicide industry. And that's exactly why it was removed from 24 Brazilian cooperative networks. Not because the science failed, but because it succeeded too well. Here, we're bringing back the knowledge they tried to erase. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. There's new content every week, and you won't want to miss it. Molluscicides and toxic bait are products that move millions a year in Brazil. The Brazilian market for products against snails and slugs generates over $100 million annually. Every farmer who sees snails on their lettuce in September buys toxic bait in August. Every garden in southern Brazil that suffers from slugs during the rainy season gets a new dose of poison. Every small producer in rural São Paulo who sees their seedlings destroyed buys more product. It's a cycle perfectly maintained by those who sell the solution to the problem they created. And it depends on only one thing, that you don't know what a snail avoids. This cycle wasn't built by accident. It was built with lobbying, financed research, and organized silence at all levels. And it's been running uninterrupted for over 50 years. A healthy garden doesn't need chemicals to protect itself from snails indefinitely. It needs physical barriers and aromatic compounds that make the environment unbearable for the mollusk. These barriers have familiar names. They're called eggshell, rosemary, and sage, and they've been in every kitchen and backyard in Brazil for centuries. Snails move using a basal muscle called a foot, which is extremely sensitive. Any rough, cutting, or chemically hostile surface immediately paralyzes this muscle. Crushed eggshell creates a physical barrier that snails can't cross. Rosemary releases camphor and borneol, which are toxic compounds to the mollusk nervous system. Sage releases thujone and cineol, which cause respiratory paralysis in slugs and snails on contact. Together, these three elements create permanent and completely free protection. Researchers from the entomology department at the Federal University of Lavras published a study on physical barriers and plant-based repellents against mollusks in 2008. The results showed 100% elimination of snail presence in treated plots. Eggshell barriers combined with repellent plants maintained effectiveness throughout the season. No reinfestation was recorded in plots that maintained renewed eggshell coverage, and the cost of the method was literally zero. Eggshells are discarded daily in any kitchen. The study was published in a national scientific journal and presented at horticulture conferences. Then it was quietly ignored by the cooperative networks that distribute molluscicides to producers. No rural technical assistance program started advising its farmers about this free alternative. No agronomy school integrated it into its basic pest management curriculum. The information remained hidden in an academic journal that no one outside the university reads. This video is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a set of information the industry doesn't want you to know. Medicinal plants that pharmaceutical companies made sure to bury, homemade pesticides that cost pennies and work better than store-bought ones, preservation techniques your grandparents used before refrigerators existed, natural fertilizers that make your garden explode without spending anything, fermentation secrets no one teaches anymore, and much more. The link is in the description, but keep watching here because the video is just starting. The eggshell acts through three simultaneous mechanisms that no chemical molluscicide replicates. First, it creates a physical barrier that the snail's foot cannot cross without injury. The sharp edges of the crushed shells cause micro-injuries to the snail's basal muscle. The snail immediately retreats and does not attempt to cross the barrier again. Second, the calcium carbonate in the eggshell reacts with the snail's mucus, causing dehydration. The snail loses essential moisture on contact with the shell and quickly withdraws from the area. Third, the eggshell accumulates aromatic compounds from neighboring repellent plants. It acts as a reservoir of camphor and thujone, which enhances the repellent action of the plants. The combination of the three mechanisms creates a barrier that the snail never learns to overcome. Chemical molluscicides create resistance. The snail learns to bypass the poison in a few generations. The physical and aromatic barrier of the eggshell never loses effectiveness because it's not chemical. Why was this technique removed from 24 Brazilian cooperative networks? The answer isn't in science, it's in the business model. Malucicide manufacturers fund rural technical assistance programs in Brazil. They sponsor cooperatives and print the booklets distributed at agricultural fairs in rural São Paulo in southern Brazil. When a technique costs $0 and can't be sold, it doesn't deserve a booklet. It deserves silence. A farmer in rural Minas Gerais who masters this technique will never buy toxic bait again. A producer in southern Brazil who installs this barrier no longer depends on the system. And when enough people make this choice, their $100 million market starts to feel it. This is the real threat. That's why 24 Networks orchestrated the disappearance of this information, not through oversight, but through deliberate calculation. So how do you apply this technique in practice in your garden? There are 3 approaches, depending on your situation and the degree of infestation. If you master all 3, you'll have permanent protection against all snails and slugs, with no cost, no poison, and no dependence on industrial moluscicide systems. The first approach is the simplest and most immediate. Collect eggshells from any kitchen, yours, neighbors, bakeries, or local restaurants. Quickly wash the shells and let them sun-dry for 2 days to eliminate any organic residue. Crush the shells with your hands or a rolling pin until you get irregular fragments 1 to 2 centimeters in size. Spread a generous layer 3 to 4 centimeters thick around each seedling or garden bed. Make sure there are no openings in the barrier where snails can enter. The snail will try to cross on the first night and will immediately retreat on contact with the shell. Within 3 days of an intact barrier, snails completely stop trying to enter the protected area. In 1 week, the presence of snails in the garden drops to virtually 0. Renew the barrier after heavy rains that might compact and bury the shells in the soil. Renewing it once a month is enough to maintain permanent protection throughout the season. A farmer in rural São Paulo has been applying this barrier for 15 consecutive years. He has never bought a single moluscicide product since adopting the technique. His lettuce, arugula, and kale seedlings reach harvest without any snail marks. His neighbors spend all year on toxic bait and still lose part of their production. The second approach is the most powerful for severe, already established infestations. Combine the eggshell barrier with the strategic planting of rosemary and sage. Plant rosemary in clumps every meter along the garden's perimeter. Plant sage interspersed with the rosemary, creating a double aromatic barrier. Rosemary continuously releases camphor into the air and soil around the plants. Camphor is toxic to the mollusk nervous system with continuous exposure. Snails already inside the garden begin to withdraw within 48 hours. Those outside the garden no longer enter, even if the eggshell barrier is temporarily broken. A vegetable grower in rural Minas Gerais used this combination in a severely infested garden. The garden had lost over 40% of its lettuce production the previous season. After 2 weeks with a double barrier of eggshells and aromatic plants, lettuce production returned to normal, with no additional loss due to snails. He documented the results with photos and sent them to the local cooperative in 2016. The cooperative acknowledged receipt but never responded. No technician was sent to verify the documented results. The third approach is the most sustainable and autonomous for the long term. Create a permanent system for collecting and reusing eggshells at home. Never discard eggshells again. Each shell is a fragment of a free barrier. Store the shells in a dry container until you accumulate enough for monthly renewal. A family that consumes 12 eggs per week produces enough shells to protect an average garden. Combine shell collection with the permanent cultivation of rosemary and sage along the garden edges. In 3 years, you will have a completely autonomous system that requires no external inputs. The rosemary and sage plants propagate on their own and expand the aromatic barrier each season. The shells accumulate and progressively enrich the soil with calcium carbonate as they decompose. A community garden in rural Paraná has been operating this integrated system for 12 years. They have never bought any product against snails or slugs during this period. Their vegetables reach harvest in perfect condition, even during the rainiest seasons. Reports were sent to 2 state rural extension programs in 2018. Neither of them initiated any follow-up studies or site visits. The eggshell barrier isn't the only solution they've hidden. Propolis eliminates all foliar fungus in 24 hours for $1 per application. Garlic extract kills spores and repels sucking insects without any toxic residue. Mulch eliminates 90% of irrigation needs completely free. Magnesium sulfate extends the productive life of any plant for 3 per cutter. All these solutions have a solid scientific basis, documented by decades of real research. All cost almost nothing compared to the industrial alternatives the industry wants you to buy. All were common practice in Brazilian agriculture before industrialization reached the countryside. All disappeared from official recommendations in the same timeframe, the timeframe in which the pesticide industry consolidated its dominance over Brazilian plant health policy. This isn't a coincidence. It's a pattern that repeats in every state, in every region of Brazil, without exception. And when you see this pattern with total clarity, you can't unsee it. There's something profoundly right about protecting your garden with what your own kitchen discards every day, with no value assigned. The hen lays the egg, you eat it. The shell protects your garden feeds your family. No poison enters this cycle at any point in the process. No toxic residue accumulates in your soil over seasons and years. No dependence develops on a system that profits from your ignorance. This is what our grandparents called not wasting what nature offers. What the modern moluscicide industry calls a direct threat to their business model. Every time you spread eggshells around your garden, you completely exit this system. Every time you share this knowledge with another producer, someone else exits too. This is how the cycle breaks definitively and permanently, not with protest or petition or pressure on any government, but with eggshells, rosemary, and the precise knowledge of how to use them together. You now have what you need to start tomorrow morning. $0, 3 approaches tested and documented by real researchers in real institutions, and the certainty that your garden can be protected forever, without depending on a system that removed this information from 24 networks to ensure you never discovered it. Real, practical knowledge you can apply tomorrow morning. If this video opened your eyes, share it with anyone who has a home garden. If this knowledge changed how you view managing your land and combating pests, subscribe and like the channel. We're bringing to light the history and techniques they tried to bury. Cultivate the future and protect your harvest. The next treasure of knowledge will be revealed soon.